Hi, this is Simon from Tokyo Productions and welcome to another tutorial for Motion 5. This time we're going to be looking at creating this fire-based text effect, and there are some pretty interesting tricks which I hope you'll find useful. So let's get started. I've got a project that is 1920 by 1080, my frame rate is 24 frames a second, and the duration is 10 seconds. And I've already got a piece of text typed up. I'm using the font Trajan Pro and the point size is 350. So let's get right ahead and start to style up this text. We're going to come to the Style tab, and in the face I'm going to fill with gradient. I'm going to open up the gradient and I'm going to make two more color tabs by clicking on this bottom bar, 1 and 2. The first tab I am going to set all the way down to black, 000 on RGB. The second tab I'm going to set to 0.4, 0.2 and 0. The third tab I'm going to set to 1, 0.6 and 0. And the final tab I'm going to set to 1, 1 and 0.8. And I'm going to adjust the locations of these. This second tab is going to go to 25%. The third tab is going to go to 50%. And the right hand tab is going to go to 65%. I'm also going to turn on the outline, and I'm going to leave the color as that solid red default color. I'm going to turn up the blur to 50 and increase the width to 3. And I'll reduce the opacity to 75. And that gives us this background glow. Then I'm going to duplicate that text. Command D. I'm going to set the blend mode of this new layer to multiply. Come to the style properties again. I'm going to turn off the outline, and the face I'm going to remove all the color tabs apart from that left hand black one, and I'm going to set an opacity tab by clicking on this top bar. The left hand tab I'm going to move its location to 52%, and the right hand tab set it at 100%, and I'm going to reduce its opacity to 60%. And now you can see it's just doing a little fade off towards the bottom. But in order to get the look that I'm wanting, which is a black infill for the text, I'm going to use a filter. Filters, keying, Matte Magic. And I'll drag that onto the layer. Come to the inspector, and I'm going to shrink by 1.5 and set a feather of 30. And you'll see how much more sophisticated that looks. And now we're going to duplicate that text layer one more time. Command D. I'm going to delete Matte Magic out of that because I don't need it. Come back to my text properties. I'm going to set the blend mode for this layer to Add. Come back to the style properties. I'm going to turn off the face, and I'm going to turn on the outline. We don't need this crazy blur, so let me turn that down to 3. And let's set a gradient. Open the gradient generator, and we'll set the left-hand color tab to 0.5, 0 and 0. And the right-hand color tab we're going to set to 1, 1 and 0.6. And we're going to set an opacity tab all the way to the right, and the left hand opacity tab we're going to set the value down to 0. We're also going to come down and turn on the glow, and what we're going to do is have a very, very low opacity of 5%. First of all, I'm going to add a filter, stylize, crystallize, and apply that. And if I play that, you can see that I've got this shimmering effect. That's starting to look good. I'm going to set the size to 10 and come down to the mix value and set that to 50. Then I'm going to add blurs, a Gaussian blur, come to the inspector, and I'll set the amount to 10 just to soften that off. We're also going to add color correction levels. Come to the inspector. To open the controls, come to the opacity. I'm going to have a white-in value of 0.3 and a gamma value of 0.75. Now I also want to do a little bit more to knock it back and make it look more organic. I'm going to create a new group. I'm going to call this mask, and I'm going to come to my library, generators, cellular. I'm going to come to the inspector and set the size to 30. Next we'll come to the gradient and the right hand color tab. We're just going to move its location to 60% to brighten it up. And we're going to come to the properties, scale, transform, and I'm going to set an X scale value of 200, just to stretch it out a bit like that. Then we're going to come to our top text group. Let me call this Fire 3. And I'm going to add an image mask. And to do that, I'm going to hit Cmd+Shift+M. And I'm going to take that cellular and drag it into the mask source well. And I'm going to set the source channel to luminance. And if we zoom right in, turn off that mask, turn it back on again, you can see how that's knocked it right back and created quite a nice effect. So let me name this group here text, and I'll close up that mask group. And let's just add a filter to the text. Filters, color correction levels. Come to the inspector, to open the controls, to open RGB. I'm going to set a black in value of 0.1 and a white in value of 0.8, and I'm going to set the opacity gamma right down here to 0.5, and that's reduced the opacity of those see-through bits, including that red glow. So now we're finished with our text. We want to start thinking about adding some fire. So I'm going to make a new group, Command-Shift-N. And to get us started, I'm going to use one of the built-in fire effects, but really I'm not going to use very much of it. It's really to show you the difference between Apple's built-in fire and the one we're going to make. So I'm going to use Pyro, Campfire, and I'm going to apply that. And I'm going to call this new group Fire. There's a group above here which has got the particle for that fire. First of all, I'm going to set the blend mode for this layer to Add. And you can see that's punching through a bit more, adding the values. Then I'm going to come to my Adjust Item tool, turn on the overlays, Command /, and I don't know if you can see here, with the Adjust Item tool, I can drag out the line that is the source for the emitter. And if we play that, you'll see the limitations of that fire effect. It's all created using one single particle. If I zoom in on that particle, you can see what it is. It's just a soft, blurry shape. It's very, very obvious to the eye that that pattern is repeated over and over again. It's also obvious that it's not animating. It's just a static shape. And finally, fire is anything but soft like that. It's really quite sharp and not blurry. So how do we create a better class of particle? Let's close up that group, hide it, and make a new group, Command-Shift-N, and we're going to call this new group Particles. And we're going to come to the library, and for our particle we're going to come to Generators, and we're going to add Membrane and apply that. If I zoom out, you can see what the membrane looks like. It is sharp and it animates. So first of all, let me scale it down to 75 by 75, so it's much more manageable. There we go. I'm going to set the speed to 0.3 and come down here to the brightness value, and I'm going to type in a value of 100. You can't use the slider to get to 100, you have to type it in. So now we're going to make just some random changes to these parameters here till I get something that I think looks like a wisp of fire. It's just to get something you think looks pretty. That'll do for me. And because I'm going to have two different fire sources, I'm going to duplicate this. Command-D, I'm going to hide the first instance, and I'm just going to make a change. So we've got a very different looking particle, and I can hide both of those. And then I'm going to take membrane 1 and I'm going to drag it into the particle cell of the fire, like so. All a bit crazy at this point, but that's because we need to make some adjustments. I'm going to turn down the birth rate to 130. I'm going to set the life to 0.5. The speed I'm going to set to 900, and the speed randomness to 150. The angle randomness I'm going to set to 180. Set the spin randomness to 0. We don't need spin because those particles have got enough movement of their own. And I'm going to come right down to the scale here and set that to 10. And I'll set the scale randomness to 100. What I'll also do is I'm going to adjust these colours, and I'm going to remove this tab here, so I only need to use 3 colours. Throw that away. I'm going to come to my left hand tab and set a value of 1, 1 and 0.7. I'm going to come to this middle tab, set a value of 1, 0.9 and 0.2, and the right hand tab I'm going to set a value of 0.6, 0.2 and 0. And I'm reasonably happy with that. I'm just going to adjust the value of this center opacity tab down to 10 and set the location to 20. Now I want to have the fire coming off the letters rather than just being generated by that line at the bottom of the text. So in order to do that, I'm going to hit F5 to show my layers again. I'm going to make a new group, Command-Shift-N, and I'm going to call it Geometry. Hide the Layers panel, B for the Bezier tool, start at the bottom of the F, come to the middle of the F, come across the crossbar and click in the middle of the I, click at the bottom of the I, click at the bottom of the R, click in the middle of the R, the other side of the R crossbar, the bottom of the R leg, the bottom of the E, the middle of the E, and across to the end of the E crossbar, and hit Enter. Show my layers again, and I'm going to turn off the fill. And I'm going to come back to the campfire emitter, and where it says shape right at the top here, I'm going to select geometry, and I'm going to use that Bezier shape we've just made. I'm going to hide that geometry group, and I need to make some adjustments to the emitter controls. First of all, I'll turn on emit at points, and I'm going to set the number of points to 30. The emission angle I'm going to change to 90, and the emission range to 30. Then, because the emitter has slid down a bit, I'm going to select my Adjust Item tool, turn on the overlays, Command / and then just drag the emitter up till it's sitting where we want it to be sitting, like that. And hit Tab to come back to my transform tool. Let's call the emitter fire, like so. And I'm going to duplicate it, Command D. First of all, I'm going to take membrane 2 and I'm going to drag it into the particle cell for that copy. And I'm going to come down to the bottom of the emitter controls and hit Random Seed. For this emitter, I'm going to set the scale to 30 and the scale randomness to 150. And I want to make a couple of changes to the path for this. I've missed out that bottom of the E there. So let's come to the Bezier and duplicate it. Let's turn back on that group, hide the original shape. I'm going to tab through until I get to Edit Points. I'm going to drag this first point on the F up to the top. I'm going to delete this control point here. Drag this one down to the bottom of the E. Then I'm going to come to Fire Copy and use Bezier Copy for the shape source and turn off that geometry group. And now we've got a better result. Needs still a great deal more work, so don't despair just yet. I want to have the fire behind the text, and of course I could just put the text group above, like so. But I want to do something a bit more subtle than that, so I'm going to drop that back down again. And I'm going to come to the fire group, and I'm going to make an image mask, Command-Shift-M, and I'm going to use that text group as the source. And remember to turn the text group back on again. And then I'm going to invert the mask that I've just created. So now that's effectively the same as having put the text on top. But what we're going to do is we're going to come to Filters, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and apply that to the mask. Come to the inspector. I'm going to set the amount to 20. Let's zoom in so we can see how that's working. Turn off the Gaussian blur, turn it on again, and you can see that that's starting to encroach over the edges, and it's looking as though the text is sitting within the fire. And I'm going to just reduce the vertical blur to 50, so it's a little bit sharper across the top. And I am going to add a filter to refine the look of this fire group. First of all, I'm going to add color correction levels and come to the inspector. I'm going to come down to the opacity. I'm going to set the black in to 0.02 and the white in to 0.85. And I'm also going to come to filters, blur, directional blur, and add that. Come to the inspector. I'm going to set an amount of 15 and an angle of 90. So this is almost like a motion blur as the particles stream upwards. But it's keeping a lot of the crispness because it's only going in one direction. So this is looking reasonably good so far, but I want to add some brighter spots of fire that are going to travel up the letters and just add generally to the sense that this is real fire. So I'm going to make a new group, Command-Shift-N, and I'll call that one Hotspots. And I'm going to set the blend mode of that group to Screen, come to the Library, Generators, and I'm going to use Cellular again, and I'm going to apply that. Come to the Inspector, set the cellular size to 12 and the speed to 2. Let's come to the transform properties and set the Y scale to 150. Next, let's come to the gradient, and the left hand color tab I'm going to set a value of 1.6 and 0, and I'm going to move that to 50%. I'm going to leave the right hand color tab at 100% white. I'm going to create a new opacity tab on the right hand side there, clicking on that top bar, and I'm going to set the left hand opacity to 0 and its location I'm going to shift to 20%. Next, I want these particles to move upwards, and in order to do that I'm going to come to the library, filters, right down to tiling, and I'm going to select offset and apply that. Come to the inspector. If I move that vertical value, you can see that it slides up and down. Right click on the vertical offset, add parameter behavior, ramp, and I'm going to set the end value to 175. Then if we look what happens, we can see that that scrolls up. Let me zoom in and explain one problem, which you can see there, I think, that there is a seam running through the pattern where the tile repeats itself. And we're going to fix that by coming to the library, filters, blur, Gaussian blur. We'll add that, come to the inspector, set the amount to 20, and I'm going to reduce the horizontal to 0. And that's taking care of that seam. Next, we're going to add an image mask, so this texture appears just within the area of the text. So I'm going to hit Command-Shift+M, and I'm going to use that text group and drag it into the source well. And I'm going to remember to turn the text back on again. And we are going to break up the shape of that mask so it's not confined exclusively to the area inside the text. We're going to come to the library, filters, down to stylize, crystallize, and apply to that image mask itself. Come to the inspector, I'm going to set the size to 15. And I think you can see how that's now got these various bits that poke outside the immediate outline of the text. We need to refine that edge a bit, so we're going to come to the library, filters, keying, and we're going to use matte magic again and apply that. And we'll come to the inspector, we'll set a shrink value of 2 and a feather of 10. And that's about taking care of those troublesome edges. Now we want to refine this hotspots group. I'm going to come to the library, color correction, levels, and I'll apply that. Come to the inspector, open the controls. I'm going to set an RGB white in value of 0.4 to really punch up those whites. The opacity white in I'm going to set to 0.5, again really punching that up. And the gamma I'm going to set to 0.4, so we get rid of a lot of that extraneous extra material and we're just left with the brightest bits like these. And we're going to add a glow on top of that just to finish things off. Come to the library, glow, add glow, come to the inspector. I'm going to set a radius of 5 and the threshold I'll set down to 0.5, and that just adds a bit of extra finesse and helps to soften them off a little bit more. And now I think I would actually like an extra set of hotspot particles, so I'm going to duplicate that cellular, Command-D. I'm going to adjust the size to 20, and I'm going to come to the ramp behavior and set that end value to 200. In fact, I'll come back to the generator and I'll also adjust that speed, just so we've got a little bit more variation. And you can see I've got a nice lot of particles in there, which really help to sell the effect. Finally, close up all those groups. I just want to add a camera, and if I add a camera directly, all these groups will turn into 3D, and I don't want that. So I'm going to make a master group, Command-Shift+N, call that master. I'm going to select all the other groups, shift-click, drag them into the master group. And now I'm going to hit Option-Command-C or Alt-Command-C to create a camera. And I'm going to say keep as 2D. And then I'm just simply going to select that master group and turn that into 3D, leaving all those groups inside as still 2D. We'll come to the camera. I'm going to set the Z position to -1000 and come down to 50 on Y just to center it up. And finally, I'm going to add camera, dolly, and I'm going to dolly in by an amount of 350. And if we do a RAM preview, we can see what that looks like. And although that's not perfect, it's given you hopefully enough tricks to refine it a lot more to your own taste. Obviously you can change the color of the fire, you can change the density, you can add more particles, but I think the basic techniques are there, and I hope that's been an interesting one. Thanks very much indeed for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.